Hello everyone. This is your host, Akil Jabbar, and welcome back to another episode of SaaS District. In today's episode, we'll be talking about how our guest has built 96 side projects, with several of them in only an hour a day. Today, we have our guest, Mubashar Iqbal, joining us. Mubashar, also known as Mubs, is the co-founder of Founderpath, a platform that helps SaaS founders get capital without selling any equity. Mubs has been tinkering with computer science since he was about 8 years old and started building websites in 1995. He loves making many things, a perk that led him to be selected as Product Hunt's Maker of the Year for 2016 and also runner-up for 2015 and 2017. At the beginning of his career, he worked mostly with internet startups in San Francisco and New York. Now he's been trying to help others make other products. And most recently, he's been building SaaS businesses in just 1 hour a day, which we'll cover on today's podcast. So for the last 9 years, he's been living in New York with his wife, Robin, and his 2 daughters. So welcome, Mubs. Super excited to have you on our show today.
Thanks a lot for having me on. Absolutely. Excited too.
Awesome. So for those in our audience who don't know who you are and your background, we'd love to start. Can you just share a little bit of your personal background and what led to where you are today in your journey?
Yeah, long and windy tale. Started in a small village in the north of Pakistan. Mm-hmm. My dad studied over in England, and once he finished studying, he decided he wanted to move our family over to England. So when I was about 4 years old, we moved from Pakistan to England. I lived and studied there. That's where I grew up. So I think I was there for about 18 odd years. Went to university, did computer science. I got a job after university for a little startup it was an Australian company. They were doing a project in England. They decided they were going to move the entire company out to San Francisco and asked me if I wanted to move from England, where I was living at the time, if I wanted to move to San Francisco. And I jumped at the chance, and so I've been living in the States ever since, working in the internet and the web industry. Worked at a bunch of startups. Worked for the last until Founderpath. More recently, I've been kind of in the agency world instead, so working for some pretty big and kind of household names, but through an agency, which unfortunately we can't really talk about because of NDA things.
Sure, fair enough. And then from there, you launched. At what point did you launch Founderpath? I think that was last year, right?
Founderpath has kind of evolved. I think officially we launched in January of this year as Founderpath, but we've been working on the idea itself for about 18 months or so now.
Cool. And then you also have this other project, which you call which you start the SaaS in an hour project a day, right? What motivated you to start that? That's an interesting concept.
Yeah, I think I tried to shorten it. It's now just been called 1 hour SaaS. So so it's a little bit easier for people. Sure. So it's just 1 hour SaaS.com for all the updates and things. It was kind of an interesting challenge. I mean, I like to make a lot of things in terms of lots of side projects and things like that too. But I've also been to a lot of hackathons and things where we've kind of crammed like the entire product life cycle into 24 hours, sometimes into 54 hours in a startup weekend kind of environment. But as I spoke to kind of founders kind of online and stuff, or people who wanted to be founders, I should say, they always, they complained about the fact that, they come home from working a full-time job, they have a family, they have kids, they have friends who want to hang out. And they said, well, really, maybe I have an hour a day where I can work on like some new thing. And so I was like, well, maybe let's see if that's possible. Can we work just 1 hour a day, and can we build something, and can we launch something that people will actually pay for? So that whole thing was kind of like a challenge to kind of see how feasible that was. I've been doing it. I think I'm on hour 45 at this point. So it's kind of interesting to kind of see how that's evolving and seeing what the challenges are there as well.
So would you say working on any side hustle, or specifically a SaaS project, because I think there's more complexity to it, with only an hour a day, like is it feasible for any founder to release something meaningful? And adding to that, I'd like to hear, what is your typical schedule look like? How do you structure that time so that 1 hour is super focused and you actually get the right things done?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what you're trying to build in that 1 hour. And obviously the sort of the idea that I chose to kind of explore with this was something that I think you could do sort of in that 1 hour a day. I think there's some things that ultimately it's still possible, right? Whether you're working 8 hours a day or 1 hour a day, you can, with enough time, you can accomplish anything.
Sure.
But what's feasible? How long is it going to take? Can you get to market fast enough in just 1 hour a day? I think it becomes much harder to kind of tackle some of those kind of things. But yeah, I think ultimately, as long as you're not trying to invent something entirely new, if you're trying to like repurpose an idea, ultimately I built, I'm still building, I should say. It's an uptime monitoring system for podcasters, right? So. So just to give you the high level, it's just like the sort of other uptime monitoring systems out there, things like Kingdom and sort of those kind of offerings, but specifically focused at podcasters. So not just monitoring your site, but also your RSS feed. And, we're going to add some more features in terms of is your podcast still listed in Apple? Is it still listed in Spotify? Is it staying in sync with your RSS feed in terms of what episodes are available in sort of iTunes and kind of things like that? So just kind of monitoring the sort of operational stuff of a podcast. Specifically for podcasters, rather than just using just kind of uptime stuff that's kind of out there for kind of other people. So, I wasn't really I wasn't inventing anything new kind of in this particular case. It was taking an idea that kind of existed and then just trying to implement that with a specific focus for podcasters specifically. And so I think if you're going to take something like that where you're not really having to do any big deep building very specific software that's not out there, and trying to understand some big task that like I said, still you could do it in an hour a day. It's just going to be a lot harder and take you a lot longer instead.
Sure. Yeah, makes sense. And then can you summarize for those who are maybe looking to apply something? It doesn't necessarily have to be an hour a day, but your overall, what is your playbook? What is your process? Because you built so many at this point. You probably have like a system that just seems to work and you can do it, release a lot quicker. How do you validate, build your product from idea to launch? Tell us a little bit more about that process.
Yeah. So, I really have two approaches, I think, that I tackle. And it depends a little bit on what kind of problem I'm trying to tackle. So either I start with like what's the unique bit about the thing that you're trying to build. So if you're working on a SaaS product, so for example with podcast paying, obviously the sort of main focus is how do you do those checks? How do you know if the site's up? How do you know if the RSS feed is available? If the RSS feed is valid? What's the thing that you need to build to kind of test if you can write the software that you kind of need to do? And so in some cases I start with that, like that's the core of the application. If I can do that bit, all the rest of it's just like the usual stuff. Got to add user sign up, add user registration, add billing with Stripe. It's all stuff that I know I can do, right? So depending on what you're trying to build, you start with that sort of core functionality that isn't out there already and the bit that you want to work on. And then you just kind of flush it in with the sort of all of the rest of the stuff, or you use like a package that might kind of give you a lot of that functionality out of you just sort of just install it and it all just works as well. So that's kind of one approach if you want to test an idea really quickly. And then in other cases, I kind of work the other way, where it's I just build the site out statically and say, look, these are the screens. This is the experience that I want users to have as they kind of work through the application. So you kind of think through what the user flow is, and you think through it kind of makes you think about what are all the different bits of information that I need, what are all the different pieces that I need to collect from the end user, etc. And you kind of build out the sort of site statically, and then you just add the functionality kind of into it as well. So that's in terms of actually like doing the actual build itself. In terms of overall, like taking it from idea to kind of launch. In terms of the idea itself, like there I tried to focus on just things that I know that I'm experiencing, rather than having to spend weeks like interviewing people to kind of figure out what's the pain? How do we solve that pain? It's going to take you a while to kind of extract all that information and try and figure out what to build to actually solve that thing. If it's a problem that I'm experiencing myself, it makes it much easier to build something that I know is going to solve the problem as well, right? So it's going to be much faster to kind of ideate on that and to kind of make it into something real as well. So it can take a little bit of a leap of faith, right? In terms of, I know I'm experiencing this problem and I think other people will as well. And so in some cases I will also kind of reach out to some, to people I know, and kind of find out if they think it's a good idea or not. And in some cases I'll just take that leap of faith and say, I know this is a good idea, and I'm gonna execute it, and we'll kind of see what happens on the other end of that as well.
Fair enough. And then you do some kind of pre-launch or some kind of validation, probably as early as possible, right, to see if there is interest. And
yeah, I mean, and again, I mean, I try and build things so quickly that I feel like the building and the launching of the thing is the validation of the idea. Like, if you're going to spend like 2 weeks or even a weekend to kind of make something and have it that's something people can actually work with and kind of interact with, then that is the validation of the idea itself, as opposed to spending 6 months working on something and then kind of handing it over. There, I think, you kind of have to spend some more time kind of, building a landing page and seeing if people like the idea and sign up for the mailing list and all that kind of stuff as well. I've kind of worked like that too, where it's like, where you want to put something out there and see if people are interested, versus just actually creating the thing itself and then just kind of, putting it out there for the world to kind of see at that point.
And just to clarify, this is only you building it? You don't have like a full team that's going in there and coding and building it for you?
Yeah, in terms of the coding, it's usually just me. I mean, I do sometimes I work with people who are designers on projects as well, and so sometimes we'll kind of split the work in that, in terms of somebody else will do all of the UI work in terms of branding and look and feel and sort of that kind of stuff, and then they'll just kind of hand that off to me, and I'll do all of the implementation stuff.
Very cool. And then in terms of structuring, so you have 2 weeks to launch a product. How do you typically structure and organize your time to be as effective and efficient as possible?
Yeah, I tend to. I'm very much, I guess, what you'd call passion-driven development. In that, there'll be some times where I just sit down at 9 o'clock at night sometimes, and I feel very excited about what I'm doing, and I'll sit down and I'll start working, and it will be like, I'll look up and it's like 3, 4 o'clock in the morning and I'm still working. Yes. And it's just, you just get in the zone, and it just seems to, comes together really easily in some instances as well. But so yeah, I mean a lot of this stuff is being done in kind of weekends and evenings because there's side projects, right? So I work pretty late into the evenings after having worked a full day, and then you come and you hang out and you spend some time with the family and everything like that. And then once everybody's asleep, and then I sit down again at my laptop and kind of start working again. And so yes, sometimes it's an hour a night, sometimes it's 2, and sometimes, like I said, you'll sit down and it's like I said, it's like 3 or 4 in the morning, and you've got a functioning application.
Makes sense. And then on top of that, when you're launching, so you have your time. Obviously, that's a cost to it. Are there some other initial costs that you kind of put into this to bootstrap? Because you're essentially bootstrapping to get a typical SaaS project off the ground in order to get that validation to market demand.
Yeah, there's really not too much. I mean, obviously, there's some things that you can't avoid. Like, so you have to pay for hosting somewhere, usually in some point, in terms of hosting the application itself. To buy a domain, you have to pay occasionally. You basically have to pay, and that depends on what kind of domain you manage to acquire at that point as well. And really, that's the 2 expenses that you can't really avoid. Outside of that, there's kind of a bunch of optional things that you can or not pay for. And in the past, sometimes when I'm not working with a designer. I'll hire somebody to kind of make me a logo, which is not my expertise, but I kind of make do sometimes. But sort of other times, well, maybe if I spend a little bit of money, it'll be a better looking thing. But yeah, so other than that, I mean, I try and focus to things like SEO in terms of trying to do customer acquisition stuff through SEO and through launching on platforms like Product Hunt and things like that, where there's no direct cost associated with that stuff. And that's my way to see if the idea works.
Interesting. Is there any favorite tools or resources that you love to use that you find that are more effective, and you find maybe others can also look and leverage themselves?
Yeah, I develop most of my projects using the Laravel PHP framework. And so there's a bunch of packages that kind of standard off the shelf stuff that will give you a lot of functionality out of the chute, so you can just install them. They'll give you user sign up, user registration, a lot of the sort of standard SaaS kind of stuff that you need to build in terms of having even things like having teams inside of your application if that's a feature which you need. So you can get a long way without having to write any code yourself by just installing the framework and these kinds of packages. I try and leverage those as much as I can. If I can avoid writing code, I do, because other people have written it already. So there's no point me writing the same stuff over and over again as well. So and then in terms of some things, or I should say some other things, because I'm using Laravel, there's a service called Forge, which is actually by the creators of Laravel itself, which helps you manage and deploy applications onto servers. So you can link it with your AWS account or with your DigitalOcean account, and it will automatically create the server for you, install the web server software and all those other kinds of software that you need to host the actual site itself. You can link to your GitHub applications and your repositories and deploy the code automatically and do all that. So all that infrastructure-y DevOps stuff that a lot of people don't like to do, you don't have to do any of it. You can just point and click and kind of set everything up so that it's very easy to kind of have your code in a production environment really easily.
Very cool. And then, for example, like Founderpath, where companies where you've kind of validated the markets being maybe let's say like a year after you've launched. Is there anything else that you're investing now, your additional capital that will help you see, you've seen better results from? So you mentioned like, SEO and then some, Product Hunt launches. Is there anything else you find at that point that are worth investing in?
No, it's actually funny, but like doing things like this, right? Like just trying to get out there and spread the word about the things that you're working on, I think is really helpful. I also tend to build in the public as well. So, a lot of the work that I do, I kind of share what I've learned, what I haven't, some issues that I run into, or kind of how I solve those particular problems as well. I think that's a really effective way to build an audience and to build, your first 1,000 fans as well, just in terms of sharing your experiences and kind of things. I think that's a pretty cool way of doing that. And then, once you get past a certain stage, I think you just want to build a kind of a calmer enterprise as well, right? So you start putting processes in place that will kind of help you just kind of run things efficiently and smoothly. And I think focusing on that kind of stuff once you get past the validation phase so that you don't have to manually do everything. And, you just have some scripts that run that just kind of automatically do the things that you used to have to do manually, I think really helps you. One, it just kind of takes that cognitive space that all of those tasks were taking up and frees those up so that you can actually work on what's important right now. And then just kind of gives you that free time back, even if you just don't decide that you don't want to work, those extra hours. At least now you can just work like regular hours instead.
Makes sense. And then, I want to talk about a little bit on the financing side, because that's one of the platforms you built. So you built your new SaaS business, Founderpath.com, which you co-founded with Nathan Latka. So shout out to him, where you provide debt financing to SaaS founders. Why should SaaS founders consider using debt for their business rather than typical route, which is raising like a venture backed round? And at what point do you think it's more critical and better to go down this route to see the best results when they're considering all these types of financing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main reason is that we're not taking any equity away from you. We're not demanding to have a seat on the board of your company or anything like that. So that's always been sort of a main motivating factor for what Hayden and I started. We think people work very hard to kind of start their own companies, and we think they should own as much of those as they can, and kind of have the flexibility to kind of run those in what makes sense for them, rather than being worried about what a venture capitalist might want and what the venture capitalist is kind of hoping for in terms of outcome and kind of things like that. So I think that's the main kind of motivating factor for us, and the main sort of differentiating factor as well. In terms of timing, like we use your kind of history in terms of what customers you have, how well you've retained them, how you've churned, how they've churned, what your customer concentration is, and we kind of do a very deep analysis on kind of all that kind of information to figure out if you're a good fit for us, and so it does take a few months, if not a year, where you can kind of establish yourself and kind of have that history where it kind of makes sense for you to come to somebody like us instead of trying to raise more capital with the traditional approach instead.
Makes sense. Yeah. So you got to have some kind of traction, something to work off, right? And build your data off. Yeah. So you've built and released, a lot of products. You probably definition of a serial entrepreneur. You love building things. I think I saw 96 in total since I last checked yesterday. So I think that's almost like one new business a month, in the last few months. And so I saw you built and released brandedbackground.com in about 2 weeks. Yes. So I love that, speed over perfection business model. I think that's great. However, why do you spread your focus and time across several SaaS business and projects versus, what's the thinking versus focusing on one business and then just really trying to blow it up and grow it?
Yeah, I think me personally, obviously I do have the one main focus, right? Like Founderpath is the one main thing that I'm working on currently, but I love to experiment with things, right? Like I try new models, try new things, see what works, see what isn't working, and I firmly believe that to kind of see what works, you have to actually try it, and the best way to do that is with a real application. It's not, it's not like some theoretical thing out there as well. So I think that's one of the reasons I keep coming back to like, well, let's build something new, and kind of see what works. Also, and if you look back over my list of things that I've worked on, you'll probably see about a third of those are things that I've kind of helped other people start as well. So even with Branded Background, for example, I built that with a friend of mine who was interested in Zoom, in the remote space and all that kind of stuff. So I was like, well, let's build something. Let's see if we can explore the market. Let's see if we can explore this space by actually building an application and seeing, see what the response to that is and see how it fits into the industry as well. So, So as much as I like to focus on one thing, as much as I can, I also like to see kind of what sort of other options are out there as well.
And are you typically, partnering with people, like, for example, your friend on this deal, or are they coming to you, like, because you mentioned the agency as well, are they saying, hey, I know you do good work and, I want to build this product. Can you help me build it? And, you charge them some kind of consultant fee. Yeah,
so usually it depends on in terms of who it is. If it's a friend of mine, then normally we'll just do it because it's a fun thing. And then we'll just be co-owners of that, and we'll kind of see what happens. If it's somebody else, in the past, people have just come to me and said, "Hey, Mubs, I need you to make this thing. Here's a spec for it. Off you go." And that's just been a for hire kind of thing in the past. But I tend to prefer to just not. I mean, it's like I said, especially if it's a friend of mine or something like that, then I just like to kind of help them along and kind of see if we can make something that that is sustainable long term as well. So it's just been a mixture of that kind of stuff as well.
Very cool. And then I know one struggle that, for any startup is obviously finding, product market fit in your business model. What's your, you're building a lot of product in your business model, essentially. How do you work to overcome that hurdle as quickly as possible?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the main thing that I do is just kind of is get to market as fast as you can, right? So, in the past, I've done the old let's put together a wireframe, let's put together what the example of what this application might look like, and I think over the years I've come to find that usually users aren't, as much as you can try and elicit the sort of right kind of feedback from everybody, people are very bad at giving you feedback on things that aren't real. And so, I try and get to market as fast as I can, because then people are actually using a tangible thing and they can click around and see it and feel it and really understand it, versus, talking about hypotheticals a lot. And so, trying to get to market as fast as I can. And then, the main approach is just trying to figure out where the potential audience is. Subreddits recently have been a really, really awesome place to go and find people who are going to be potential users for your application. So for the branded background thing, for example, there's a few subreddits where it's people are just sharing backgrounds that they've made for Zoom calls, and so it's obviously a perfect place to go talk about the sort of tool that we built, and so there's lots of little communities like that out there, and it's getting much easier to kind of reach, not like a massive, not reach the entire industry, not reach the entire market, but if you want to test your idea, reach enough people where you can get good feedback on what you've created.
Makes sense. But adding to that, how do you balance being, fast enough to go to market from that MVP to soft launch and promoting it, while still, focusing on a quality product that somebody can actually use, and it's not, you're not short changing it.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's a mixture of experience and having worked on this for 20 years now, making stuff on the internet for 20 years, it's kind of giving me a leg up, I guess. But also just not leveraging, existing platforms, existing tools, I'm very open, in terms of in the past, I've just purchased themes off of theme sites. Why spend weeks custom designing something when you can use something that's been tried and tested and true and works really well? Absolutely cut as many corners as you can. Don't spend too much time, saying, well, I made this from scratch. I mean, people don't care that you made it from scratch. All they care about is if it works or not, right? So just cut as many corners as you can, not in terms of quality, but in terms of the actual time that you're spending. If you can buy a theme for $45, or even if it's $100, that's going to save you 2 weeks of work. That sounds like a pretty good way to spend $100.
Agreed. So you mentioned a few kind of effective growth strategies, right? SEO, product hunt, and a couple of other, subreddit groups, and different kind of just speaking and giving your kind of story. On the other side, I'd love to hear kind of, what have you seen in the last 20 years to be least effective, or any failed growth experiments, if any?
Yeah, I mean, I think hopefully this is not going to be happening. But the whole building stealth and you're having a big, massive launch and stuff. I mean, yeah, if you've got millions of dollars in the bank and you can afford to do that stuff, absolutely fantastic. You should do it, or not. I mean, I don't know. Actually, maybe I still wouldn't do it even if I had the money in the bank. But that's obviously a very bad approach, right? I just don't think it's a good way, especially now. I mean, obviously, maybe 10 years ago, the world was an entirely different place, and it made sense to kind of build things in private and then just have this massive reveal. I don't think you have that same kind of importance of having to get national press and so those kind of things to have a successful company anymore. You can launch small and iterate, sort of a lot over time, and that's just as effective as having that kind of big kind of launch as well. So let's not do the whole stealth thing anymore. I don't think that's very good. I think ultimately, you just want to get as many people to try your software as you can, and hopefully, you'll get good feedback off of that as well. So, just try and I know a lot of engineers, people like myself in the past who've just like, oh, I made this thing and I can't find users. Well, and then I talk to them, I'm like, what have you tried? Well, I haven't tried anything. Well, at the end of the day, if you don't try anything, you will fail. So, it's not, there are lots of different strategies out there, and you have to find the one that fits both you and the audience that you're trying to reach as well. But I think the best thing you can do is kind of experiment. And I think the worst thing you can do is try and look for that one thing that will kind of take you over the top, because I don't think that one thing exists anymore.
Sure. And would you suggest somebody who's, engineer, technical background like yourself, maybe, they just can't figure out how to, get users, is maybe partnering with somebody who is a marketer or somebody
absolutely
with that
background? Absolutely. I strongly believe that you should lean into whatever your skill set is. And for somebody like me, I love to build things, and I think I do that pretty well, but I also know that I'm not the best at marketing and sales and things like that. So absolutely, once you have a product, or even prior to you having a product, it's usually easier if you have an actual product. Start to reach out to a few, start to reach out to people. There's, people use communities like indiehackers.com is a really awesome place to either just get ideas of how you might market things, but also to reach out to people who might be interested in partnering with you as well. So absolutely find like-minded folks who are interested in. I think the key though is to find people who will actually have an interest in the market that you're working in, right? Like, so let's not just go find any marketing person and salesperson. I think it has to be somebody who maybe isn't quite as passionate as you are, but also has the interest in the thing that you're working on as well.
I agree. Yeah, they have to have a lot of interest into solving like what the problem is. Like that'll keep them along long enough, and it's not just like, we can make a lot of money on this, because I don't think that'll last for long. A lot of our listeners, and I think in general, are maybe less non-technical people. But what's your advice for those who are non-technical and they want to follow your footsteps, or they want to start a SaaS company?
So thankfully these days it's very, very easy to build a lot of things without having to write any code. There's a big no-code movement out there now, where people who have no technical skills whatsoever are able to build a website or to build an application even that has a lot of the functionality that in the past has taken very skilled engineers to kind of work on as well. So I think again with that, it's just like start making progress, right? Even if all you're doing is building a blog or building a website or an email list or something that is starting to attract the audience that ultimately an application that you build will actually be for that audience, it makes it much easier to find engineers and things like that who are kind of willing to kind of help you out and kind of make the application, if you ultimately do still need to write code to kind of solve the actual problem that you're trying to solve. So just start the journey in however you can. And like I said, there's lots of tools now out there that will make it very easy for you to kind of start without having to know anything in terms of having to not having to know HTML and CSS and any of that kind of stuff. You can point and click, and you can create really awesome looking sites that are very specific to what you want to do as well. So again, just start on the journey, and hopefully along the way you'll kind of find both an audience and kind of maybe even a co-founder that will hop on as well.
Is there any specific tools that you really like, especially on the no-code stuff that you suggest? I know there's Webflow and others.
Yeah, Webflow is a really awesome one. I tend to refer people to my friend Ben Tossell started a site called MakerPad, and it's very much exclusively in that whole no code space. And he has a listing of all of the different kinds of technology, all the different kinds of tools that you have. Has lots of tutorials about how to use all of those to kind of make specific things. There's things like Card and Bubble as well is another awesome tool if you want to build more kind of application-y stuff. And so check out MakerPad, which like I said has a list of all of these things on there as well.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. So makerpad.co for those who want to check that out. Very cool. I have to check that out. Mubs, who or what are three mentors and or resources that you would say have been instrumental in your growth and success over the years? Is somebody you look up to, or is any books or anything you follow right now that you think is helpful for others to look at?
Yeah, and so this was probably the hardest question that I had in terms of when you sent me the list of things that you were going to ask me about. I was like, I don't really know. It's funny because a lot of the people that I did get a lot of help from over the years are just people I worked with over the years, and not anybody famous that you will have heard of or anything like that. But we just sit down in evenings where we finish working on the projects we were working on, and there's a bunch of Alex Pineda was probably one of the first designers that I work with that really explained to an engineer what good design really was. And so that's been a key thing that I've kind of tried to do over the years, is even though I'm an engineer and I've been an engineer my entire life, I also wanted to know what makes a good looking website. I also wanted to know from a marketing perspective what makes a good marketing message and things like that. So talk to as many people as you can, but not just other engineers. If you're an engineer, you can pick up those skills fairly easily. It's much harder and much more fulfilling to pick up all of the other skills. But even if you don't have to use and implement those skills, just knowing how people are talking about these kind of things, I think is really, really important. And the same's true the sort of other way around too, right? Like if you're a designer or a marketing person or a salesperson, understanding how an engineer talks and the kind of things that they're interested in, you don't have to know how to write code, but if you know the kind of things that they want to know, I think it just makes the whole collaboration so much more fruitful as well.
I agree. Yeah, getting into their minds and respecting what their skill set or what they actually understand. Mubs, what does success mean to you today, whether it's personal or business?
Yeah, I mean, I think my family is really important to me, and I think every day I'm trying to put not just myself in a good place, but my family in a good place. So I think that ultimately is you're never going to have a perfect balance between work and life, but I think at some point you want to make sure that you treat both the things that you do to get paid and earn money well, but you also want to make sure that the things that you're doing that for, in terms of spending good quality time with your family, is kind of also equally important as well. So I think success for me would be finding that and striking that work-life balance, which is not always something I'm super good at, unfortunately.
Sure, as long as we're striving to get there at some point, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, cool. Mubs, what are some future product plans for you? What can we look forward to, or any other interesting products maybe into next year or 2021? Anything in the pipeline?
Yeah, no. So I think, obviously with Founderpath, we're continuing to expand that. There's going to be a lot more offerings and a lot more ways that we can kind of help founders there. On the side project front, I think I'm still going to be kind of interested in the podcasting space. I still think that there's lots of growth opportunities there as well. So I think there's going to be a number of projects that I'll be launching in that will help podcast hosts and hopefully grow the industry some more.
I agree with that. So how can our audience get in touch with you and follow your journey of building a SaaS business in an hour a day?
Yeah. So onehoursas.com is where I've been kind of sharing my experiences with that stuff. And I'm pretty active on Twitter as well. That's probably the best place to kind of reach me. So just at Mubashar Iqbal, which is my full name, on Twitter, and my DMs are open. So if you want to reach out to me, absolutely happy to have a chat with anybody.
Awesome. And that's how we connected. So we'll put all those links in the show notes. So if you guys want to reach out to Mubs, feel free to. Thank you so much for your time, Mubs. I really appreciate it. And
no problem.
We'll chat next time.
Thanks for having me on. Absolutely.
Thank you all for watching this episode and joining SaaS District today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for future episodes where we interview top leaders in the SaaS industry. If you're a SaaS company looking to grow and unlock the true value of your business, get in touch with us at Horizon Capital, and myself or one of our consultants will provide a free assessment to help you get there and hit your goals. If you have any feedback or suggestions for this podcast, please comment down below and help us improve our content for you all. Thanks again, and see you on the next one.